Let's begin with the most popular one, whiskey. You can think of whiskey as an overarching umbrella. Any spirit labelled as whiskey is, at its core, a distilled drink made from fermented grains. Different regions use their own preferred grains, distillation methods and aging practices, but the fundamental concept remains unchanged. Whiskey is produced from grains such as corn, rye, barley, or wheat. It is distilled and then aged in wooden barrels, where it gains the colour and flavours we associate it with. This is where things start to get more distinctive. Nearly every country puts its own spin on whiskey. Irish whiskey is often known for being smooth and approachable. Japanese whiskey is typically refined and subtle. American whiskies tend to be rich and sweet. Canadian whiskey is usually lighter and more mellow. So when people refer to whiskey, they're really talking about a broad family of spirits, connected at their core, yet each shaped by its own culture, climate, and traditions. Now let's narrow things down to bourbon. Bourbon is a distinctly American whiskey, defined by law in the United States, and to meet that definition, it has to be made from a mash containing at least 51% corn. That heavy corn presence is what gives bourbon its characteristic sweetness. Unlike Scotch, which we'll talk about in a moment, which often relies on previously used barrels, bourbon must be aged in brand new charred oak barrels. These barrels contribute rich caramel, vanilla, and toasted flavours to the spirit. Bourbon can technically be produced anywhere in the US, but it's most closely linked to Kentucky, where the water, climate, and deep distilling heritage have helped shape its reputation. There's also a strict rule about additives. Nothing can be included other than water. No extra flavouring or colouring, just whiskey that matures in fresh barrels until it becomes that deep amber spirit that people recognise. So while bourbon tends to be warm, sweet and full-bodied, it's strongly influenced by corn, climate and American tradition. Now let's move on to Scotch. If bourbon is the bold, sweeter all-American spirit, Scotch is its strict traditionalist Scottish relative. The first thing to understand is simple. Scotch has to come from Scotland. If it's produced anywhere else, even with a nearly identical process, it doesn't qualify as Scotch. This style of whiskey is most often made from malted barley, and the Scottish climate has a huge influence on how it turns out. The cool, damp conditions slow the aging process, allowing Scotch to develop a more gradual and complex character. Some Scotches have that smoky, earthy flavour known as peatiness, which comes from burning peat during the malting stage, a practice with deep roots in Scottish tradition. However, not every Scotch is smoky. Depending on the region, you'll also find expressions that are fruity, floral, or distinctly malty. Areas like the Highlands, Lowlands, Islay and Speyside each contribute their own unique style. Another important detail is that Scotch must be aged in oak barrels for a minimum of 3 years. And because preserving tradition matters greatly in Scotland, the regulations are quite strict. So while bourbon tends to be warm, sweet and full-bodied, Scotch is typically earthy, smoky and layered. This is where the distinctions really stand out. Take a sip of Scotch, and depending on the style, you might pick up notes of smoky peat, dried fruit, honey or malt. It often leans drier and more layered, sometimes even carrying a hint of saltiness if it comes from coastal areas like Islay. Bourbon, by contrast, delivers a more rounded sweetness, with flavours like caramel, brown sugar, vanilla, and those deep, toasted notes from charred oak. It tends to feel fuller, richer, and occasionally a bit heavier on the palate. As for whiskey in general, it can land anywhere along that spectrum depending on its origin and the grains used. An Irish whiskey might come across as smooth and easygoing, while an American rye could be bold, spicy and sharp. So even though these spirits may look alike in a glass, their flavours can tell a completely different story each time. Picking between whiskey, bourbon and Scotch really depends on the kind of experience you're after. If you're looking for variety, whiskey as a whole gives you access to a wide range of styles from all over the world. If you lean towards something sweeter and more comforting, bourbon offers that warm, rich character that's easy to appreciate even if you're just starting out. If you enjoy diving into deep, complex flavours that reveal themselves gradually, Scotch could be the perfect choice. However, after your second glass, you likely won't notice the difference anymore. Another often overlooked detail is the type of glass used for each drink, since its shape can influence how the aromas are delivered. As for whiskey in general, the choice of glass can vary widely depending on the style, ranging from a simple tumbler to a more refined tasting glass. Bourbon, with its naturally sweeter and more robust aroma, is typically poured into a wider glass that allows those bold notes to open up. Scotch, on the other hand, is commonly served in a tulip-shaped glass that narrows at the top, helping to concentrate the scents and highlight its more subtle layers. It's less about strict rules and more about enhancing the overall experience. Even a small change in glassware can make the same whiskey seem smoother, richer or more expressive, adding another dimension to how it's enjoyed. In the end, whiskey, bourbon and Scotch all belong to the same family, yet each has its own story to tell. Whiskey is the broad, global category. Bourbon stands as a bold, sweet American classic, and Scotch represents a proud, tradition-focused expression from Scotland. Click the video on your screen right now and I'll explain another everyday mystery you've wondered about your whole life but never thought to look up.